Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai. Hello and welcome to the New Zealand Rugby Winter Tournament Week Coach Webinar. That's a long handle. I hope your prep's going well and that you and your team are looking forward to participating. Ko Wayne Masters Toku Ingoa. I'm Wayne from New Zealand Rugby. I'll be your host this evening. Tonight's just simply as an opportunity for us to hear from some world-leading experts in rugby, in fact, in sport in general, and particularly in regards to our teenagers. I'll introduce our panel very, very soon, but before that, our two topics that we're looking at tonight are Kelly from Sport New Zealand is going to be discussing being innovative with teenagers, and we also have two coaches very experienced in rugby who are currently with the Highlanders, and they'll be leading a session on theming, so you can help theme your secondary school program or campaign. So those are the two topics tonight, some theming and being innovative with our teenage players. There'll be opportunities for you to ask questions along the way, either during the session or at the end of the session. So please use that chat function to ask any questions you like, and we'll do our best to answer those questions along the way. So remember, any questions, type them into the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them. But let's get started. I'm rapt to be able to introduce Kelly Kerr. Kelly warmed up for tonight by appearing on The Project live on TV3 on Friday night. That's right, I do watch my TV, Kelly. She's a regional sports development consultant at Sport New Zealand, and her role focuses on working with national and regional sports organisations to improve the sports experience for our rangatahi. She's worked in sports for over 2 decades, held a number of different roles from community through to high performance level, both here in Aotearoa and overseas. Kelly's been involved in rugby as a player and a coach, and is currently coaching the mighty Hutt Old Boys Marist under 11s. So go the Eagles. Tēnā koe, Kelly, and I'm just going to hand over to you.
Kia ora, Wayne. Nā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Kelly Kerr tōku ingoa, ko Ohi Sport Development Consultant o Ihi Aotearoa. So kia ora, everybody. Absolute pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you so much for the opportunity to kind of share. And yes, I was on the project at a very last minute call last night talking about sideline behaviour and parents on the sideline. Look, tonight's session, what I've been asked to talk to you, all of you wonderful people, about is around innovation and around how do we engage our rangatahi, our teenagers, in sport, and I guess the role that you have and the important role that you have as coaches. So Cam is a wonderful sidekick for tonight, and so he's going to start hopefully sharing the slides for me, please, sir. Fab. Hopefully you can all see that. Kane, I can see you on my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that one too? Champion. So this is the mighty Hutt Old Boys Marist under 11 Eagles. But look, tonight's session, we're going to cover off, I've got some ideas, I've got some things to consider. We're going to talk a little bit about why kids play sport, what they love about it, what they hate about it. But also there's a ton of expertise and there's a lot more knowledge on the call than just me. So please do put your ideas. There's going to be a couple of opportunities to pop your ideas into the chat as well. And really do ask those questions. This session is about getting the most out of it as you can. So next slide. So first thing I want you to do is just have a think about what it felt like, your greatest sporting experience. So what did it feel like? And that might be you as an athlete, it might be you as a coach, but who was there? What were you doing? And I want you just to hold on to that feeling throughout this session, because that's the feeling that we want our kids to be having in sport as well. And just as, you know, if you can use that chat, what's the one word that describes what that was? So it might have been fun, it might have been winning, it might have been friends, it might have been mates. So just as we go through, if you can, chuck that one word. How did your greatest sporting experience, what did it feel like? And again, hold on to that, because that talks to the value of sport. You know, we know that sport's amazing, does great things for our kids. It helps them connect, it helps them develop, it gives them a sense of belonging. And so we want to make sure that as we're developing these kids and we're engaging them, that we're really making sure that they get the most out of it. Because what our kids tell us is that they really think that 91% of kids think that participants feel their coaches support their confidence in sport. So your role as a coach is so vital in how these kids experience sport and in how it grows their confidence. And also things like, this club or their school provides the appropriate opportunities, and 78% of participants feel that their club encourages fair play and sportsmanship. And those are really important parts of how we engage kids. And that talks to some of this innovation stuff, and we'll get to that in a little bit as well. One of the other things that I wanted to point out here, so on the bottom of the screen, it talks to top 5 challenges faced by coaches. And this is some research that Sport Waikato did, where they did a voice of the coach survey. And I particularly, wanted to highlight, so these are the challenges, these are what coaches are saying the hard parts are, right? And number 2, and I appreciate it might be a little bit small on people's screens, but it talks about, number 2, one of the challenges is around lack of engagement from players. Number 4 there talks about meeting the needs of all players. And number 5 there talks about skills and drills and what to do. And so combining all of that, we know that it's tricky being a coach. And so can we address some of those challenges by thinking a bit differently, by acting, coaching a bit differently, being innovative in our sessions to address some of those challenges as well. You jump to the next one for me, Cam. So actually, why do kids play rugby? What do they want? And I'm sure that everyone on the call, you know a lot of this stuff already. This isn't going to be new to you. But they play to have fun. They play because they're good at it. They play because their friends or their teammates play. They get to progress and develop. Parents support, and parents want them to play. And I've just highlighted, these are some direct quotes from some research that was done out of Wellington, talking directly to groups of young people, in particular groups of rugby players. And it talks really to that they love being part of a team, they love being with their mates, it is about their friends, they want to be challenged, they enjoy the physicality and the competition, the team are like my brothers, and because of the way it's played. And so thinking about why kids play and actually what is motivating them, what do they want out of this experience, really leads us into thinking about, well, what does innovation, how do we need to construct our sessions, our trainings, our games, our pre-seasons to really support and meet the needs of these kids, because engaging them and engaging teenagers can be really tricky. So if we jam a couple of those things together, right, onto the next slide, we can group them into 3 really high-level themes. So what do they want from rugby? They want it to be fun, they want the connection, and they want progression. So I'm going to get you to push the boat out here, people, if you can, and jump into that chat. And that might be Kane and Dave as well. So reflecting on your coaching, what's one thing that you do currently within your coaching that connects to either fun, connection, or progression? And I'm just going to give you a moment, and I'm just going to chuck some of those things in. How do you bring one of those things to life in your coaching sessions, in your coaching with players? And it might be a really simple thing that you think about, but just if you can, throw something in. Games, fabulous. I'm going to come back to you on those games, Wayne, don't you worry. Wait for the next few slides. Connections using different languages as instructions, amazing. Cool. So acknowledging different players and different cultures in the teams, and so using our language and how you connect to those individuals. Thank you. Team rituals, nice. So if we break down some of this stuff as well, right? So fun means totally different things to different people. It can be about winning. It can be about just simply participating. It can be about being out there and being with their mates. Equally, obviously, connection can be with peers. Connection can be about coaches, but connection can also be about whānau and how whānau is connected to their young people's playing experiences. It might be the only time that the family's all together is when they're out watching that kids play sport. And so how do we support, as coaches, how do we support that connection to be able to happen? And the final one there is around progression. And when we think about progression, it's things like skill development. But it's also things like leadership and how we support young people to lead and progress and grow their skills to really, extend and enjoy. So how do we make sessions fun? How do we enable connection? And how do we ensure that there's progression as well? And that happens across all levels. So that's not, leadership, skill development happens for those players that want to play socially, but it also happens for all of those players that are in those first teams or that have aspirations of furthering, their rugby skills and their rugby playing abilities. What we also know as well, though, is things like there's difference between girls and boys. Girls want to connect first. They want to chat. They want to have that social connection. They want to play with their mates desperately. Boys will be maybe a bit quieter. Will want to just kick the ball around and have a few more challenges. I remember being at a workshop and the presenter was talking about girls need to feel good to play and boys need to play to feel good. So how we bring all of this stuff together into some of these things. So Bryce Awesome had weekly fun where someone got called out as Action Man and in 1 minute to find Action Man getting back in the circle. Amazing. How deep and personal some of the boys got and very vulnerable. Fantastic, thank you. So just thinking about different ways. So if we go, in order to engage our young people, in order to be innovative, here's 3 things that we know the kids really want out of sport. How do we weave some of that into the rugby sessions as well? We jump onto the next slide for me, Cam, thanks. Because the other side of the coin here as well is that what kids don't want, and again, appreciate that some of these slides the text may be a bit little, but the reason that kids drop out of sport, one of the reasons that kids drop out of sport is they talk about just being bored. And it's a sense of prioritising repetition over progression. So if we go back to fun, connection and progression, if we're not addressing those things, it becomes about repetition. They don't feel that their needs are being met. And so they start disengaging, and they may do that in lots of different ways. So that might be about dropping out, or it might be just about being disruptive at trainings and things like that. So getting bored was one of the biggest reasons I stopped playing, to be honest. I just got bored. It was all of the same. It wasn't interesting anymore. I was doing the same thing at training every week. So innovation becomes really, really important. We think about how we want to keep these kids engaged in sport because it's going to meet their needs more. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to get more out of the experience. And we're not going to get that sort of boredom stuff happening as well. So things to, I guess, ideas to think about. Jump on to the next slide for me, please, Cam. So tying all of this stuff together, what can fun, connection and progression look like in different components of our season and of our kind of experience as coaches? So thinking about our pre-season, how we use team building activities, how do we establish team values, that is fun, that gives people an opportunity to connect and shows progression as well. And so that can be things like giving people additional leadership responsibilities within the team. And that's across age groups. It's not just something that needs to happen in those first teams or those senior secondary school years. That can be things and little things that you can establish earlier in that kind of year 9, year 10 age groups as well. certainly something I try to do with our under 11, so the year 6 kids, around how do we make sure that they are given the opportunity to progress through leadership opportunities. You know, in trainings, what are the variety of activities that we're utilising? How do we let games do the teaching? So, you know, one of the things that Wayne talked about, how he brings that to perspective, was things like games. So a variety of activities, let the games do the teaching as well. Within the games, things like rotation of positions, variety of roles, and broad skill development are really, really important. We know that rugby players now need a diverse group of skills. And so giving them the opportunity to experience different roles or have different experiences within those games, that broader skill development opportunity is really, really important. So how do we make sure it's fun? What the connection opportunity is there, and what's the progression that can happen within the game situation as well? And things like at tournaments, the social activities, the different ways that you can bring kids together, in particular in those tournament environments where you've got them together for a few days at a time. How are you making sure that the environment's fun? How are you giving them the opportunity to connect? And what are the different progressions that need to happen within that experience? You know, we know that repetition of drills creates boredom. How do we make sure that we've got novelty in our trainings? For team sports, you know, position specialisation is something that we really do want to defer until later adolescence, in particular because we know that kids develop and grow at different rates. What are the variety of activities that we're doing? So it might be different activities, and also how do we give kids the opportunity to lead? It might be doing different things. You know, kids have the opportunity to run the warm-up and rotate that around the team, because it gives them a sense of, I'm being given some level of responsibility. I've got shared leadership and I can contribute to my team as well. I'm going to hold there for a second, and is there, you know, so there's a couple of things that have jumped in through the chat there as well. Are there other examples of different parts of the season where we can build in fun, connection and progression too? So if there's any ideas, drop them into that chat as well. Or if there are any questions, again, as you know, as we sort of said, opportunity just to ask lots of questions and share some ideas too. So jumping into the last slide for me, Cam. It's all well and good for us to go, yep, cool, do all of this stuff, guys. You know, be innovative, think about how we can bring different activities in, but actually going, well, where do I find this stuff? You know, because if I think back to that very first slide, that second slide, which really talked to the challenges that coaches face, it is around skills and drills and what to do, meeting the needs of diverse players, and a lack of engagement. Where can we get ideas, and where can we get new, you know, things from? And these are, you know, plugging the Sport New Zealand moment there, guys. So Balance is Better website, fantastic spot, and the Ted Lasso, some of you may have seen on the end there. But Balance is Better website has got a whole load of articles, videos, you know, research pieces, ideas to support you in your coaching to think about, well, how do I really engage rangatahi? Because they are different. They're not like primary school kids. They do change a lot at 15. Things start to get, you know, I'm fortunate I've only got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old at the moment. So all of this chaos is to come my way at some point. But Balance is Better website, great place to look. And I told you, Wayne, your stuff was going to be coming up here, mate. So Rugby Toolbox is another place to look for some ideas, for some games and activities. And there's lots of stuff online. And so I guess my you know, critical message back to everyone is, do keep learning, do keep looking for new ideas and activities. talk to the young people in your team, talk to the rangatahi in your team, and understand what their motivations are. What does fun, what does connection, what does progression look like for them? And then try and fill your basket with a whole load of knowledge and a whole load of different ideas. Because if we think back to that very first activity, that very first thing that I asked you to think about, which was what was your best sporting experience and how did it make you feel? That's what we want. That's what we want for all of our rangatahi, is to feel that they love sport, they want to be involved, and they want to be engaged. And so I'm going to open up to any questions, and Wayne, if you've got any other questions as well.
Hey, thanks, Kelly. Just while we're waiting for any other questions to get typed in, I've had a couple of questions that have come through to me. So I'll ask you this question, and yeah, happy for Kane or Dave also to jump in as well with any insights they might have. Question that's come in is, Kelly, how much time would you spend on connection versus technique or technical? Sorry, how much time would you spend on connection versus technical tactical coaching?
Oh, good question. I'm going to speak from my experience, and then as I really open up to Dave and Kane for their expertise too. I think you can do both. I think that if you're structuring your activities, if you're structuring your drills or your skill development sessions, it gives the opportunity for kids to connect as well. You know, using game-based activities where they have to connect and they have to problem solve, or there's scenarios that they've got to work through, that gives them the opportunity to connect while you're still learning some of those technical, tactical pieces as well. You know, things like utilising players to develop their own set moves, their own plays is another opportunity. It can be chaos, but it gives them the opportunity to connect, to talk to each other as well. You know, I think for girls and you know those that are coaching young women, the first 10 minutes of practice is letting them come in and letting them connect and letting them talk to each other about how their day was, and that becomes part of the routine and part of the connection that they have that brings them into the session. Other thoughts from others?
Anything to add to that, Kane and Dave?
I think that's you raised some really good points there, Kelly, and around Kane and I are actually coaching an under 13 year 7 and 8 team. I think they're never too young to try and problem solve. A lot of them are at different levels, but you get those kids that come through. So involving them, I guess, in their learning and development with, I guess, an example of some of the game-based learning that we've done and around, okay, well, how could we change the scenario here, or how could we change the conditions around what the game we're playing? And then seeing them think and have a discussion, and you know, no answer's the wrong answer. So having that sort of environment as well, but just growing that critical thinking and involving them in the process of their learning, I think is really important.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think just to sort of add to that too as well, encouraging young people to talk and to give an answer and not feel too judged as well, I think is really key, because we want everyone to have a voice and participate and help. And you know, I think some simple things in terms of even connection is like, oh, who saw something awesome today and who was it and what was it? And then all of a sudden, you know, Wayne hears me say that about him, and he's like, oh, that's awesome. And then there's a nice little connection there too as well. So, you know, really getting them involved in things they've seen someone do absolutely awesome, and or maybe something like, well, what could someone else do better too as well to help them, you know? And I think just engaging them in those types of conversations, I think are pretty key too as well.
And I think it's also going, and you know, where we understand our players and we understand the different dynamics in the groups. Some might be really confident to speak up in front of everyone, where others, it might be in smaller groups. And that's how we build their confidence, but also giving them a voice as well.
Awesome. Hey, thanks there, Kelly. What I took out of what you've just been taking us through is around that, the importance of that fun, that connection, and that progression part, and also interesting around those nuances between when we're coaching our girls and compared to our boys, and that connection first with our women and girls players. So some great stuff there. You also talked about the chaos but learning is messy, as we know. So sometimes for us as coaches, we need to sort of learn to embrace the chaos and let that stuff just unwind and happen, because that's when the real learning happens, as we know. Kelly, thank you as always. Any last comments from you, Kelly, before we turn things over to our other two panelists?
Oh, no, look, thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas. I hope it's prompted a few little things, a few new ideas for people, but again, just keep learning, keep finding new ideas, and keep connecting with and understanding the rangatahi that you're working with, would be my last few things. So thank you.
Awesome. Hey, thank you again. Thank you again, Kelly. And I like how you put that little weirdo, that challenge out to our coaches. How can they make those memories for their players at tournament week? Because it's a great opportunity to build those great memories. Again, thank you, Kelly Meitaki Mata. Thank you for the great mahi you're doing out looking after our teenagers in whatever sport it is that they're involved in. Lots of great resources to back up Kelly's korero, as she's already said, rugbytoolbox.co.nz, and of course Sport New Zealand, particularly that stuff around the balance is better. So just a little Google of Sport New Zealand or balance is better. Lots of great resources there. And again, thank you, Kelly. Hey, moving on, we've got Kane Jury and Dave Dillon with us. I know they've had a busy day, so we really appreciate you finding some time for us, men. They're going to be talking about theming, which some of us might know, some of us may not. It's a fascinating area and really sort of dovetails well into what Kelly was just taking us through, particularly in around that connection piece. So just a little bit about Kane and Dave. Kane Jury trained as a primary school teacher, but also worked in the secondary school space. Currently talent development manager for the Highlanders. Has been involved in lots of high performance teams, including Fiji Sevens, Hong Kong, involved with New Zealand Schools as a head coach, Otago Men, the Otago Spirit, involved with the Highlanders in the skills capacity, and understands those teenagers from his time teaching, and also being with, I think, Director of Rugby or Director of Sport for King's High School back in the day. So that's Kane. Kane, great to have you with us. Dave as well. Dave's currently the defence coach for the mighty Highlanders. Lots of experience as a player. Was a handy player with the Swamp Foxes, Waikato Bay of Plenty, and played overseas as well, I think. Real good success with NEC and Kobe Steelers, who a lot of us know from Japan, I think, alongside the Professor Wayne Smith, and involved back in the day. I can remember involved back in the day with Talent ID with the Chiefs, and like everybody on the call tonight's got that experience in that teenage space. He's involved also, I think, with New Zealand Schools or Barbars, and been a first 15 coach with Sacred Heart, I think. Kia ora korua, hello to both of you, and I'll hand over to the safe hands of Dave and Kane.
Yeah, kia ora koutou, malo alehi, bulavanaka, tolo falava ki rana, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Dillon, as I've been introduced there, and Kane and I have got a tag team tonight in around theming. So I'll maybe just get Kane to say g'day, and then we'll flip to how we're going to start our presentation.
Kia ora koutou, ko Kane toko ingoa. Awesome to be on here. It's it is a fascinating, interesting topic, and it does fit beautifully into what Kelly has spoken about too as well. An unbelievable challenge to get it right too as well, because we all understand the bells and whistles of what it will bring. But to really nail it is the challenge, and hopefully we'll give you some ideas tonight and around how you can do that too as well. So Dave, I'll just share my screen now, mate, and then we'll get into the presentation.
So just as Kane's doing that, I thought what we'd kick off with tonight is we'll just look at a video. Obviously, Kane's in the New Zealand school space. I've got the New Zealand Barbars again. We're our second year in those roles. So, and like Kane, as was mentioned there by Wayne, I was involved in secondary school rugby for probably 7 or 8 years, and obviously we look at it with your players getting younger and younger, being professional. But I just guess right off the bat for me, I wouldn't change anything around that. I'll take my hats off to people involved in schoolboy rugby or school rugby with the girls as well, just in around, the coaching's part of it. But just before we start, the ability to have change on and off the field, it's a really special area to be involved in, and I really reflect fondly on those days. So we'll just kick into a video and around the theming, and then we'll roll into some questions and statements post that.
When it rains, it pours. There will be blood in the water. Go to the court. Faith was hard on our shoulders. The legends never die.
So obviously with that there, just a bit of apologies, but still wanted to play that through just so we got a general gist in around. That's a working example. I think Wayne alluded to, was involved in Kobelco Steel, so Kobe Steel there in Japan. And if you looked at the animation and the words that come up in that, it was a progression from 2018 when we first went in through to 2020 in that video, and showed a progression of some simple things over those years. So with the theming, I use that as an example, and also Sacred Heart. So why do we theme? So there's sort of 3 or 4 key areas, I believe, in terms of why we theme. So Kane, if you just hit. So it was spoken about before previously and around that connection and connecting our young athletes. And I think, you know, we are dealing some values and standards and morals, and that still exists within society and within programs and schools, but we are dealing with, you know, kids these days that are technologically pretty savvy, and they like all the bells and whistles all in and around that. And to use the example at Sacred Heart, obviously a school that's been around over 100 years, and I'm hoping they get the job done this weekend against St. Kitts. But I sort of went in there and I thought to myself, having not gone to the school, but looking at the school and its history, is how could I connect and align our group? And I sort of went one step further and thought about how we could connect and align our rugby program. And there was some sort of common theming that come through there in terms of about what it takes to be a Maris man and how that looks with in behaviours, actions, standards, and how we want to be perceived. And then obviously the people within that environment that have gone before us. So for me, if you think about, some of you will probably already be theming, or you might be doing it unconsciously already in your program and around your skills history, or pulling little bits on terms of your emblem and your crest. But I've found theming to be a really good way to connect and align the group if you're really clear in terms around those areas that you want to put the focus on and energy towards. Secondly, I've just alluded to it before, but it does excite and engage the group. It brings a group together, and I guess the challenge Kane will talk about it a little bit more moving forward, but it's one thing coming up with a theme, putting the theme into your program. It's another thing being able to feed that theme continuously during the weeks, in terms of how you use your language on both sides of the ball, naming of your drills, all those sorts of things. So we use it at Kobe. As I said, everything was basically aligned to the theme of being a steel worker. So what were the values? And we put those together at the start of our campaign as a collective group. And for us, all the history of that company, Kabako Steel, had been around for, well over 100 years. It had been around, but no one had really ever tapped into it. It was sort of the rugby team, and it was separate from the company. So the one thing that we did, we come in and we're like, oh, okay, well, we're a company team. How do we utilize the history and the products and the different departments and significant events within the company? So, and we found that gave us a connection and alignment. And then from another stage and around, Kane will talk about it, as I said, but it excited the group because it was something new. They had input into it, although it was sort of guided discovery, and they were engaged in around it. And then just the last thing there, I think, with our young athletes and young players is, some of the stories. So I'll use the example of the Maris brothers at Sacred Heart. Like, if you want to look at, years of commitment and sacrifice for the greater good of young education within the youth, there's a lot of sacrifice in that space as well, that you can call on in every day. So we were fortunate at Sacred Heart that we had probably a dozen brothers that were still in around the school grounds and 6 that were teaching. Obviously that's changing a bit, but we had everyday examples of standards, actions and behaviours and history within the school, and people that had been around and been a big part of the environment that the boys were living in, coming to every day. So for me, I guess I've been fortunate enough. I think Nathan Harris is on the call as well. Wayne mentioned previously around Wayne Smith. He's really, really special in this area, and I learn a lot of him in around that space. And what I learned is pretty much the 3 things on there: connection and alignment, excite and engage, and inspire. And then the challenge is how you feed that every day. And I know Nath would have seen it at the Chiefs with Dave Rennie coming in and connecting to Māori culture and putting in legs on the Chiefs emblem to Jeff the Māori, and then having a we and a me leg, and feeding that every day, and then seeing that in the language and the strategy groups, and just everything referred back to the theme. So it was, I feel I've had a good, apprenticeship in that space. For the New Zealand Barbars, we're just simply got to look, and I think in this day and age, I've come up with so Barbars is a bit of a different group in terms of you have to connect really quick because it's a short campaign, and you have guys that are, potentially disappointed they didn't make New Zealand schools, and then guys that are under 18 that are playing club, and some guys that are maybe year 12 that are absolutely over the moon to be there. So we've got to bring them together pretty quickly. So obviously the Barbarians have been around a long time, so we will connect them, taking them up to the Barbars Club at Eden Park. We'll get them a tonga, pressure tonga with the Barbars symbol on it, and we've got to have a overall arching theme around being you. So I think with a lot of these guys that are in a lot of these programs, they're always trying to look at how they need to improve in that, which I think is great. But we're having a focus on this almost the superpowers that they bring. If anyone's seen The Greatest Showman, that will sort of be the basis of our theme leading into the New Zealand Barbars campaign. So it was sort of an overview. Apologies again around the video. I'm more than happy to send that to anyone that wants to have a look at that and use it in resource. And I think just for the last bit of my presentation just in around before Kane gets into the a little bit into the how, I found this quote and I thought it was quite apt, like weaving an idea or a subject through a campaign that will help to bring unity and connection through symbolism, whether verbal or visual. And I know Kane's got in discussions we've had before we put this together, Kane's got to talk around, as I alluded to, that putting together, it's one thing, just that challenge of how we keep feeding that theme consistently throughout the campaigns.
Awesome, mate. I feel like you put me under the pump there saying Kane's going to do this and Kane's going to do that. So I feel like I'm under a little bit of pressure here, mate. So thanks for that. I think the biggest one now is, again, if you haven't really done any before, you want to really think about is where do you start? And I think being at schools is the best place to start, actually, and I think it's quite easy. And when you're trying to think of, how we're going to do it, I think the best one is actually really trying to understand, what are going to be your values. And the school's got values there for you already. And so I think it's a great way to start. And one of the things we always find, particularly in rugby too as well, is that sometimes, there are people out there that feel that rugby players and coaches or students always sort of get a bit of a free ride every now and again, and they sort of do their own thing. And it's a real shame that that's how people think. But I know is that if a rugby pro can really start, think about their theming, is be really locked into their school values and how that looks as well. And particularly, what is that going to look, what do those school values look like in that rugby space or that sporting space? And that's, when you're off the field and having one-on-one conversations, formal or informal, what do those core values look like on the pitch, on the field, on the court, whatever it is? What does it look like in a game? What does it look like when we're in a team huddle? And so being able to understand those core values and then agree upon with the whole group is, what's that one behavior we feel that value looks like off the field? And what does that value look like on the field? So now we can actually see it and bring that to life too as well. And if you get a whole agreement in and around that, then I feel you're at a really, really good place to start the theming side of things, but really recognizing who you are is and how you go about your things on and off the field. I think it's a good place to start. And then I guess if we just look at this picture here, I just sort of wonder, look at all the smiles and from the coaches and everybody there. And I mean, how did they get to that point that team has somehow connected and they're enjoying it? And what was it that's brought them together? And again, theming is theming always about trying to bring, does it have to be about some story about, I don't know, an NFL player or, somebody from the war? And does a theme always have to be that? Or can the theme be simply, well, this is who we say we're going to be via our school values, and let's just go and be that for a start off and drive it that way. And I think if you're really consistent with that, then I think you're on the right track. And then you'll find your moments to find other different stories outside of who you said you want to be, who you are, what you're currently doing. And then I think you can find other stories that can go and match and support what you currently are doing. So yeah, it's a great picture there. And so I guess in terms of that, now it's the consistency. So again, we've got a really good understanding of it all, but what does it look like to you on a day-to-day basis? So that's just something for you really to think about. If we refer to it every single day and we're recognizing it every single day, encouraging it every single day, then I think we're going to be in a great spot to then get this unreal connection and unity that we spoke about too as well. So referencing it really often, and that is it the players that reference it, is it the coaches, is it other people? I even wonder whether do people outside that group, do they reference it to them as players or coaches in terms of what they've seen them do too as well, which would be an unbelievable place to get to. And then the other one too is, I guess it depends on your age group, but I firmly believe that at the moment we've got some really good young people who we believe are leaders, but we also need to try and lead them to be leaders too as well and teach them to be leaders. And that's making sure that they're involved in and around giving feedback and around behaviours that we've agreed upon, again, on and off the field too as well. They're constantly referencing it. They're doing it day to day or training to training. And I feel that there's a little group there that could potentially help with that too as well, that you have. And then I guess I suppose I'll bring it back to Dave here too as well. So again, now you've got all those core values, you've got those behaviours. Now we can start bringing it to life a little bit. So I'm going to give you an example that Dave used back in Kobe. So I'll bring him back in, and then I'll just go back to my side of it just via some Fiji 7 stuff and around storytelling. So Dave?
Yeah, so the image that Kane's put up there, and you would have seen in the video that was at the start, although it's a little bit jumpy. So in 1995, some of your geography teachers or history teachers will remember out there, there was a massive earthquake in Kobe. So it killed nearly 7,000 people. And basically, in a nutshell, the company Kobe Salco was responsible for really the uprising post the earthquake and the disaster. So obviously blast furnaces, and these are the bricks from one of the blast furnaces that's no longer operating. But basically a guy come in, Hidaki Tanaka, and he was external from the company, him and his dad, and they basically risked their lives to dig out the salamander in the bottom of the blast furnace to get it up and running again. And so I guess that story, we go back to that story and referred to that story as the foundation of our team. So I alluded to before how we just saw ourselves as steel workers. And in these bricks here, everyone got an individual brick. We carried it back from the company, which is about not too far a walk, 2 Ks, but we were there and got a brief history. We ran back the bricks and we built ourselves a wall within our clubhouse. And then Kane talked about the buy-in and the process in terms of putting together, your standards, actions, and your behaviours. So you see the we will there, the 5 key things that we agreed on as a collective group. And then we had the goal to be number 1 in Japan. And that wasn't just number 1, obviously winning the competition. It was leading in the way we, in every way, the way we ran our business, the way we prepared, the way we train, and around our nutrition, recovery, all those sort of things to be the best. And we wanted to be top league champions in 2018. So we could get to the point where everyone signed the back of the brick, and we kept this wall for the 3 or 4 years that I was there and just painted over the names at the back, and the steelworkers code changed depending on the group, and so did the goal. But basically, you could be simple as being challenged as, are you living the steelworkers code? So if someone's not at their best on the field or off the field, or some of their behaviours don't match what we agreed on, that's on the wall, you could simply just have a conversation around what is the steelworkers code. And then you could allude back to our goal. Well, we want to be number 1 in Japan. So when we're training, this is what we need out of this, and this goes back to our values. So it was a really good starting point for us. It was something that evolved and changed. And as I said, the code changed after the 2nd season and evolved the 3rd and the 4th season. But it was a collective buy-in. It was a theme, and we were able to live, eat, and breathe it within our language as well.
Awesome, mate. Great visual. So, look, really lucky a few years ago to work with Fiji Sevens. And look, I guess their biggest thing was their faith was really, really important to them. So there's always a lot to in the morning before breakfast and in the evening too as well. So in that year of, 2018-19, we really talked about being the David versus Goliath. So we were talking about being David purely because we're really young, so we're the 2nd youngest team on the circuit in terms of actual experience. And I remember flying from Fiji to Hong Kong, and one of the players was his first time on an aeroplane. And then secondly, he ran out in front of 40,000 people playing football, and nothing sort of really bothered him, to be fair. So that was pretty crazy in terms of how young that actual whole group was compared to everybody else on the series. But we talked about David versus Goliath, and our S&C. He's actually a Bible teacher and takes youth for lessons and whatnot. And it was unbelievable. But he spoke about David, and David went into the valleys, and David went into the valleys to find the best stones. He actually thought there was going to be 5 brothers that he was have to go and fight. So he then went into the valleys and find like the 5 perfect, round stones that he could throw at them. And he was really picky. And that was us really training back in Fiji at this point in time. And then we had to bring those 5 stones over, because it worked out perfectly for us, because we played 5 games in a World Series and we nailed it. That means we got ourselves to a final. And that's all we wanted to do, was get, to a final too as well. So we sort of tied that story in a few mornings as well. And the boys really bought into it too. And a lot of them would also speak to. They'd find their own like verses as well, and phrases to talk to. And the other one too that I've got there was an excellent one around the eagle. And the story around the eagle, the Bible basically says that for the eagle to extend his life and his existence, he needs to break his beak and pluck his feathers out and restart again. And that's what we spoke about when we came back from Canada and Las Vegas, probably the 2. We finished, I think, 7th in Las Vegas, which was the worst we've ever finished in for a number of years. And then finished 3rd in Vancouver, but again, just still not good enough from the people. But again, good reflection was in and around how do we be better. And we used a story about training was about breaking our beak, plucking our feathers to regrow and start again. And then that led us into going to Hong Kong and winning that and etc. too as well. But they were stories which were told and used in and around our theming too as well. So look, just some examples there that we've used previously too as well. As Dave sort of alluded to, they've got a really awesome group of young men there from a variety of different areas and places in their life and rugby career, I guess. And their BU is a pretty cool theme. For me this year, we're talking about a whakataukī in terms of kamo ka muri, which is really based in and around walking backwards into our future, which is talking about we've got to really recognise what's happened in the past and pick up all the awesome bits and bring it in with us now, adapt, evolve, change, to keep bringing it to life too as well. So never forgetting the past and bringing it forward with us, but in our own way too as well. We don't know what our future looks like, but if we can take all that good stuff and bring it with us, then we'll find our way. So we're going to use that, and also empowered to play too as well. And empowered is a really massive word for us in our campaign this year, because we want to teach them, educate them, bring them along, and I want them to find their way throughout the campaign too as well, which is not sort of go, well, here you go, let's see what you do. It's like, here you go, what do you think? What help do you need? Who else needs to help you? And then eventually they might leave us with some really good gold nuggets and around their ownership of their own program, of their own destiny, I suppose, in our group too as well. So that's sort of what we're going to be basing that on. And we've got sort of 4 values which will which sort of shapes us too as well, and around whanaungatanga, kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga, and kotahitanga. And that's where we're going to try and guide our program. We had those values last year. We're going to bring them through again this year too as well. So that's it. Hopefully that's puts us in about just the right time frame to sort of have any questions or thoughts that anyone has. But hopefully that's a good little snapshot of what it's all about. Where can you start? How do you bring other people in? Talk about visuals, talk about storytelling, and go and find your own way.
Awesome. Hey, thank you there, Kane and Dave as well. I've got a couple of questions that have come through to me via text. One is around, Dave, you talked about sort of standards, actions, and behaviours. Can you give us an example of what any of those might look like?
Well, I think if Kane, if you just bring up the Steelworkers Code again on the presentation. So for me, like the Steelworkers Code, for example, there and in Sacred Heart, we had what it took to be a Maris man. So I guess the same. The important thing in any team situation is you take time to, I guess, collectively come up with and agree on how you want the team to operate and live. So what standards and actions and behaviours. So, if you have a look here, the example, so the standards, actions, and behaviours that were sort of after with the Steelworkers Code, we will forge steel through hard work on and off the field. We will challenge ourselves to continuously grow continuously. We will always do what's right for the team. We will hold each other accountable, and we'll appreciate every single day. So great. There's a few key phrases in there, but and you'll see to the right, obviously it's in Japanese language as well. But when you're setting up any team, I think to whatever level, there's got to be some standards, actions, and behaviours that you live by as a group. And I think the big one in there, an L one, which was, it's difficult in the younger generation and that, but as we will hold each other accountable. And I guess that's with finding out your group and the strong personalities in your group, but also, as I say, taking the time to put together a sort of standard actions and behaviours that you want to be lived by as a team.
Awesome, thanks for that, Dave. And just one for you, Kane, just to finish off. And you talked about sort of leaning into the likes of the schools. The school will have its own values, will probably have its own motto, those sorts of things. The theme of the examples you've gave, fantastic. Lots and great how they sort of weave into not only connecting but also aligning with maybe even how the team plays the game or moves, whatever. For someone just wanting to sort of have a really basic sort of theming in place, what's something really basic that a team or the coach could do with his team or him or her?
Yeah, look, I think the most simplest one is if we think in and around, well, what do we want? What do we want? And if we go even something as simple as our fun, and we go connection, and we go challenge, I think that's a really good start to try and bring them all together. And it just beautifully aligns to everything and around how we want to coach, how we want to play. And I think something as simple as that. And you've got always, trust, hard work, and other bits and pieces. But man, that can be so hard to measure. But I think something like around that fun, the connection, and the challenge, and around playing games all the time and other bits and pieces could be a great way to start.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for that, Kane, and also Dave as well. And as somebody that had 3.5 years down there working with Canterbury and the Crusaders on the staff there as a coach educator many years ago, I really liked how they would bring everybody in as part of the theming process. So we all felt part of something special. It wasn't just for the players as well. So take everyone along for the ride, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And I like how you talked about that symbolism, taongas, rituals, things that our players or everybody involved can sort of grasp onto to help sort of lead us on our way. And you talked about, I think it was you, Kane, talked about, that really good to help excite and engage our players. Well, who doesn't want that? So a great reason to consider how you might theme your team. And the last thing I would say, just got a little bit of an insight last year with one of their NPC teams that had the shield and were trying to hang on to the shield, the Ranfurly Shield, and how they would just put their mini themes together that would just be for that week. It wasn't something that was campaign long or the duration of the season. It was just something that they would, sort of a mini theme that they would have for that week, for that particular game against that particular opposition. And so there's no reason why we can't be doing that when you're taking your teams to tournament just over a few days. Dave and Kane and also Kelly, if she's still on with us. Vinaka, thank you for what you've given us this evening. Thank you for sharing your expertise. I know you're all busy, but we do thank you for that. Remember, whānau, go on to rugbytoolbox.co.nz or get on to Sport New Zealand for lots of other information resources that can help you have a FABS season or a FABS campaign or a FABS tournament, which is fun, achieving, belonging, and of course keeping our players safe. So that's it from us tonight. A big thank you to our guests, our panelists, Kelly, Kane, and Dave. To all you out there, have a fantastic winter tournament. And thank you on behalf of New Zealand Rugby for all you do in keeping our players having a great time, having a fun time, an achieving time, a belonging time, a safe time, so they want to come back and participate again next season. So from all of you, on behalf of the panel and New Zealand Rugby and myself, to everybody out there, Pomarie and good evening.